Hey, friends. Today on the show, we have Mark Nepo, and he has his new book, Surviving Storms. We're talking all about opening our hearts, kind of how we got to this place in this world and the storm of life that we're currently living in and how we can possibly get out.
Well, trying our best. It's so wonderful to be with you and just looking together at how we can love each other forward.
I love it. Don't forget to hit subscribe, friends. It's a great conversation. Hello, hello, Heal Squad. Welcome back to another great day here. We're very excited for this episode, and we will tell you why in just a moment. But we're going to start with our quote of the day. We are living in a turbulent time. Storms are everywhere, of every size and shape. And like every generation before us, we must learn the act of surviving them so we can help each other endure. And that is by Mark Nepo, friends, who is on the show today. He wrote this book called Surviving Storms. It's amazing. It's going to help you understand why we got to this place in our crazy, beautiful world. And will probably at least make us more aware of it so that we can start dealing with the why and then the how to help each other endure, like you said. If you are a new listener to the show, welcome to the Heal Squad. You're officially a part of the Heal Squad. We do this here every single day. We're learning, we're growing, we're getting better together, and we're healing. And so that's the mission here every day is to help us all grow and heal and get better in all areas of life. So thanks for joining us. If you have a second to leave us a review, we'll leave a link in the summary of this episode. They light us up, they keep us going. So thank you so much for all of them that have come so far. Really, really appreciate it. And if you haven't already checked out my curated picks at Macy's.com/Heal Squad, please do. As you know, Macy's is a big supporter of the show. And so I have picked my favorite things from Macy's.com, put them all at Macy's.com/Heal Squad. A lot of fun summer things. I think you saw my recent travels. Some of the things I wore on that trip are on that list. So you can take a look. Anything you buy through that link supports our show, helps us keep the lights on. So thank you so much. But if you also click out and you buy something that I didn't have on the list, that also helps us. So thank you. Keep that in mind. In the meantime, Mark Nepo is a #1 New York Times bestselling author, spiritual teacher, and poet who has moved and inspired readers and seekers all over the world. Mark has appeared several times with the great Oprah Winfrey on her Super Soul Sundays. In 2016, he was named as one of the 100 most spiritually influential living people. And the Heal Squad is so welcome. The Heal Squad is so excited to welcome Mark Nepo back to the show. So without further ado, here's our conversation. I'm so excited to chat with you about your new book. It is amazing. And like I said to you as we were sound checking, it's my favorite so far. It's so needed, as you know, at this time. And so when I first read Surviving Storms, I really thought I think a little bit differently about what it was going to be. I was like, surviving storms. Okay, cool. I go through a lot of storms. Usually they're health
Yeah.
storms. But this was more broad than that, and it really covered what we're going through as a society. And I think that's really important rather than thinking about the storm you're going through as opposed to the storm we're going through.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was and as you know from the book, I started it before the pandemic. And as we moved into the pandemic, I was so struck by, as you know, the first chapter I've called The Old World Is Gone. And it really touched me in terms of my cancer journey years ago, and I was surprised how it came up so viscerally. But it reminded me of this moment when I was first diagnosed, and I was in a doctor's office and was so disoriented and afraid, and told that they thought I had cancer, and I was saying, "Are you sure you got the right folder? You sure?"
Yep.
um, and but when I went to leave that appointment, the door that I came through was gone. There was no way back to life before that appointment. And I felt so powerfully that this is what the pandemic has done for the global family, humanity. As much as, we see parts of our society want to be angry at somebody about it and or be in denial or, that, oh, there was no virus, it's a hoax, or rebel against masks. The old world is gone. There's no going back, and the only way is to love each other forward.
Yeah. It's interesting that you connected to your cancer journey because prior to the cancer journey, and part of my mission here with this show is to help people with their health. And I kept saying to friends of mine, how do I get people to have the breakthroughs I had with a brain tumor, but without getting the brain tumor, right? Like that's the goal. Let's learn without having to go through that. And I kept thinking in the beginning of COVID at some point, oh my gosh, this is the collective brain tumor.
Yes.
And so when I
Yeah.
was reading this, I'm like, oh my gosh, you made that same correlation. And so, but what I loved is you have obviously such a way with words, but you really explained how we got here. And I loved, everything about the tech revolution or the loss of relationship and the isolation of tech. And
Yeah.
and those really kind of just grabbed me so tightly. And I would love for you to explain to everybody the loss of relationship and what that
Yeah.
is.
So, and thank you. And, I was just in the beginning, opening of that book, where I'm trying just my guess at how we got here, where we are. Um, and, and as I looked back, it almost, hundreds of years, there were these fault lines that got wider and wider until here we are and needing to repair them and move forward. And one is this loss of relationship. So we can go back to the 1800s when the industrial revolution, we talk about the tech revolution, but the industrial revolution in the 1800s. So before this, we were mostly all over the world. We were farming cultures or hunting, but life revolved. What you did to live and where you were at home were the same thing, especially with farming, right? You farmed at home, you lived at home, and now all of a sudden there are factories, and for the first time, people are having to leave home to work and return and actually spending much of the waking day away from family and home and community. So that's the first thing. And then even when you're at work, you know, before this, and there are such great benefits to all of progress. It's not that we should do away with progress, but we have to realize the losses so that we can compensate. So the other thing is that, if you're a farmer, you're doing everything in the full cycle of life, from planting the seed to harvesting the crop. Well, now you're working in a shoe factory and someone says to you, no, you don't even get to make the whole shoe. You just do the laces because that serves the god of efficiency. But when we don't involve ourselves in a whole process, it starts to fragment us. So we start to not be with with all of our relationships, and we're not even involved in the whole process of life from beginning to end. So we get fragmented. And now I want to refer to, as in the book I do, to Karl Marx. And Marx um, gets a bad rap because Marx didn't create Marxism; dictators did. you know, he was a sociologist who had these insights and some amazing insights about society and progress. And this was one of them: is that in the 1840s he was watching this happen, and he noticed and said, "Wow, He didn't say get rid of progress. He said, I can foresee that these kinds of divisions and breakdown of relationship and community, they're going to divorce us from our basic human nature." And so he said, wow, he foresaw the first generation of therapists as people who would repair people to their basic human nature, make them whole again, restore their relationships, not get rid of progress, but let's make the relationships whole. Let's bring us back together. And he even called the first generation of therapists alienists because they would repair that strangeness. He coined the term alienation. He said, when you have enough citizens divorced from their basic nature, you have an alien nation. So now you fast forward to our where we are, and now the tech revolution has moved that forward even more, these separations, and speeded everything up. And so we're even more isolated and more divorced from our human nature. And so in the tech, and COVID certainly didn't help with isolating, but in the tech world, anytime we're on our phones or our iPads or whatever it might be, we think we're alone, but we're not. We're neither alone and we don't get the benefits of being truly alone, and we're not, and we think we're in relationship and we're not. We're kind of stuck in a digital netherworld.
Hmm.
And so, we need there are great benefits from being alone. True solitude, that's where we feel spirit, where we feel nature, where we feel the truth of our feelings. And there's such great benefit from, like, right now, we're together. We are more together than alone. But we get this illusion that, oh, I'm in relationship. Oh, I'm in solitude. There was the poet, the great poet Rilke, Rainer Maria Rilke, um, in the early 1900s, and he had this great line in one of his poems, and he said, "I'm alone, but I'm not alone enough to make every moment holy."
Ooh.
Yeah.
Well, and here's the thing. Why I thought this was so powerful is because you talk about grief. So the loss of that farmer getting to do the whole process and us having to do such fragmented parts of each process in our jobs, right? As things have gotten more complicated. There's a grief that's underlying that we can't even address because we don't even know it's there. And then that grief, as you talk about, there are 5 stages of grief. And so there's a denial, there's an anger, there's so many things that come from not understanding where we came from and where we are. And that's why I thought this was the way you laid it out was just so addicting because you're like, oh my God, I understand. It's like when I read Many Masters, Many, was it Many Masters, Many Mind? Many Masters, Many Lives. I remember reading that book on a plane and everything clicked about life. And I was guttural crying on the plane. I had the same feeling when I was reading this. Everything was clicking. I'm like, no wonder. Especially, I was saying my husband and I will say a lot of the similar things in a less poetic and classy way, let's say.
Well, and so this raises a couple of other things that, in terms of how do we repair? How do we move forward? How do we grow? And there's so many, that all the traditions offer, they're not abstract. They offer real tools for when we're disconnected, of how to reconnect. And some of the things still about the disconnect. So with progress, this is one of the things I think that speaks to this disconnection is not only the isolation and being cut off, but this two things. This one, this mysterious thing where, when my father, he's gone now, but in his generation, and he grew up, you know, we used to have. He never traveled anywhere, but he always was interested in other places. So we subscribed to National Geographic, and he could look at the pictures. Well, now, I I'm never going to climb Mount Everest, but I can actually go online and be over someone's shoulder as they actually climb. So that's great as long as I remember I didn't make the climb.
Yeah.
And I think one of the insidious things today is because of technology and this disconnection, No, sometimes some of us are watching the climb and thinking, I did that.
Yeah.
No, 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 no. No, where we're watching someone and we think, oh, because I thought I helped, I helped.
Mm-hmm.
No. And so the passivity of all of technology is without realizing it, we're all waiting for things to reach us. And one of the great things about all the spiritual traditions is that embodiment means things don't come alive until reach to you, till I open my heart, till I actually move toward you or the situation, and then the magic appears. So we kind of sit back and go, oh, well, nothing's happening. Okay. I guess not. I guess there's nothing there. And so what some of this all raises is what, when we do, 150 years ago, we didn't have electricity. We had to go cut wood. We had to do all these labor intensive things just to live. And so I'm glad we can just flip on the lights and the heat. Okay. But we have to that's why we go to gyms and do yoga and jog and do all, so that we do aerobics to compensate for that gift of progress. Well, now we're at a place where
Oh
we're
my God,
doing,
wait, that was like big. We're doing the aerobics to compensate for the progress. So the progress brought us to a place where we're not outside gathering wood and doing all that labor. So now we have to compensate by going to the gym for an hour.
yeah.
Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
when
Yeah.
you had to cut wood and carry coal and do things, and carry water, we didn't need to exercise because it was built in. So now we have to compensate. So now I want to suggest we are at a place we need to take it further. We need to do spiritual aerobics
How?
how to stay connected, to practice listening, holding, feeling, extending compassion, because the progress is now at a point where we just sit passively and we don't have to open our heart. Everything's brought to us. We don't have to open our mind. Well, just like physically, there's a cost for that. And the cost is staying connected and alive. So this connects to, I'm sure, I don't, like so many people, I saw the insurrection live on TV and, well, what oh my God is happening? And forget all the politics. What so uh, devastated me was, here were people doing barbaric violence, and at the same time they're taking pictures of themselves as if they don't know if this is real or if they're in a video game.
Yeah, that's the thing you talked about is the reality is lost because you see there's a tragic accident and people are filming selfies with what's going on and filming it rather than helping the person in the situation, and you're like, "Wait a second, drop the camera and go help this person." And it's
Yeah.
just people and you talked about the start of reality shows, Cops and all of these shows that started reality, and that's where everything got blurred.
Yeah. And so, I make, and so I think it sounds simple, but it's so needed now. I think that we all have to help each other restore our direct connection with life. Because if you have a direct connection with life, you have reverence for life. And if you have reverence for life, you can't do harm. So when I see all that happening, all this violence, and the epidemic of mass shootings, which is so insane in our culture, and it's more so in America than anywhere else in the world.
Hmm.
And I think, and I think I made reference somewhere there, if not in this book, somewhere else, that so we look at someone who does something horrible like that, and that they are out of their minds and they're responsible for that horrible violence. But I can't say it has nothing to do with me, because I think of these shooters as social aneurysms. So an aneurysm in the body is when a weak cell, when the body is under great pressure, that weak cell explodes and it usually leads to a stroke. So these are the exploding cells or souls, if you will, in our society. But we're creating the pressurized society that's creating the conditions where we have an epidemic of these souls exploding. So, no, yes, they're responsible for their horrible violence, but we can do something about depressurizing our society so the conditions are not there so that less of these explosions will happen.
Yeah. But how? And how do we rebuild that spiritual relationship with ourselves and with others to get there?
Well, you know from my work, I don't have answers, but I try to speak to it, you know, so I don't know. And my feeling is, my thoughts are that we need to restore our direct experience. How do we do that? Two of the oldest medicines in the world are holding and listening. There has never been a time in my life that I have held or been held that it wasn't healing. And there has never been a time when I have listened to or been listened to, even if it's even if it's a truth that I'm not ready to hear, that listening hasn't reknit the bonds between us. And you know so well that there's such stridency and polarization. So we are here again. It's like it's our turn. Every generation, you know, my parents' generation, it was World War II. You know, in this generation, this is what we're facing. How are we going to choose love over fear? How are we going to choose sharing over self interest? How are we going to do this? One, Mother Teresa said, courage is doing small things with love. So it's like one step at a time, one listening at a time, one holding at a time. And I feel that when the appropriate role of suffering, which we can't avoid because it's like the friction of the wheel of life, like suffering is for humanity what erosion is for nature. It wears off everything that is breakable till all that's left is what's unbreakable. And of course, we need each other to get through that. But once we experience that, oh my God, then we realize we're all the same. Then we reach out to each other. You know, I remember when I was younger, in my 30s, and I was on a grocery line, and there was an old woman. She was probably my age now, right? An older woman who, you know, I turned 72 this year, and
Ah, congrats.
well, thank you, my God. But if I met someone my age, and I have to say, 70 got my attention. But if I met someone my age when I was younger, I thought they were ancient. It doesn't seem so old now.
No.
But when I was in my 30s, I remember, and then I played racquetball, but I was on a grocery line, and I was an older woman, obviously had a back problem, and she was so slow moving. And I remember from a distance, back in line, feeling, oh, gee, this poor person. And then, honestly, as it took her so long, I got impatient, you know. Well, then, you know, like about a couple of weeks later, I happened to tweak my back playing racquetball. Oh, now, like going to the bathroom was like going to China. And now I got it. Well, ever since then, if I see someone like that online now, I go and help carry their groceries because I get it.
Hmm.
And this is the real role of suffering, is that we reach out, like you said, you drop the camera, you go help somebody.
Yeah. Yeah. I think to answer even my own question, the biggest thing you can do is become aware. And that's what this book does. It makes you aware of why we're in this storm that we're in right now. And like you said, it's this generation storm. And then realize, okay, we're not living in reality most of the time. We're living on Instagram, we're living on TikTok, whatever it is that your poison is. um, and like you said, reaching out rather than assuming what's going on. Like I have so many people like, oh my God, you look amazing. I'm like, yeah, if you only knew. You know what I mean? You never know because we're not supposed to post the reality on Instagram. You're not supposed to know I'm going through a horrible time. You're supposed to see me smiling and talk about, you know, whatever the line is. Kelsey, give me a good line right now. What is
Yeah.
Maybe. What was
living
that? Live,
life?
laugh, love.
Yeah.
Just living my life.
Yes.
Living my best life. There you go.
Living my best life
Yeah.
is one of my favorite ones I see. And so I think that's it. It's becoming aware of the grief that's underlying, that's been accruing, I guess, over the years. And as progress, I love what you talk about. Progress is okay. It's just now we have to know where we're at and what we're doing to compensate for that progress. I think that's so brilliant. And then reaching out and figuring out, okay, so these things are contributing to my disconnection with myself and with others. Because a lot of people are like, I hear a lot of young people like, oh my God, no one's ever there for me. I'm like, wait, but if you really look at yourself, you're not there for them either, actually.
Yeah.
You're the one that doesn't get in the car and go for them either, because everyone is so much about self care, right? Like now self care is a big thing. And so I think that can be taken to an extreme as well, is we have to be there for people. And I know in LA we're in a bubble, but I feel like we're the worst here, because we're so busy chasing our dreams. We don't have time to be there for other people. And that's something that I've been really missing here is community. But I think reaching out, being there for people, um, and being aware is going to be the biggest things. All right, friends. This conversation with Mark Nepo was so amazing and it went so long that I decided to split this up into two to make it more consumable for you guys. So this ends this part, but tune in tomorrow for part two.